Hey everyone, Ryan Young, KAATARO Jiu-Jitsu. I hope you're doing well. I have today for you a surprise guest, maybe to you, because most of you have not heard much from him lately, but is somebody that I assure you is probably one of the most important people you are ever going to hear from when it comes to Jiu-Jitsu and to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. His name is none other than Grandmaster Rorion Gracie, the first natural-born son of Elio Gracie and the father of the two famous young men that you know of now in Rorion and Henner Gracie. He is somebody that I see as somebody who has brought Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to not only the United States, but to the world and also to the UFC that we all know about. If not for Grandmaster Rorion Gracie, there would be none of that as well. And, I thought we'd bring him on today to kind of introduce you to his history of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which is our history, but, you can hear it from his own mouth. He is a 9th degree red belt, which makes him Grandmaster to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm proud to say that I have trained under him. I have been in his classes over the Gracie Academy back in the early mid-90s, and I'm glad to say that he's the first and the oldest Grandmaster of the 3 that are existing that I've trained under now. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Grandmaster Rorion Gracie.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, guys. It's great to be here, and looking forward to sharing with you some of the history that you're talking about.
So what brought you to the United States first? Or when was this and what brought you here?
I started teaching Jiu-Jitsu very young. And when I was about 17 years old, I had saved enough money. I decided to come to the States to spend a month vacation here. And interestingly enough, I decided to stay at the YMCA, which is a very cheap place to stay, the one in Hollywood. And for security reasons, decided to, not leave my money in my room at the Y. So I gave my cash and my return ticket for the receptionist to put in the safe of the company. So like I said, I came here for a month vacation and then just hang out in Hollywood for the first week. And then when I went back to the guy at the receptionist to get money for my daily expenses, I found out that the receptionist had stolen my cash and my ticket. And then I called the manager. He said, "I'm very sorry. I'm going to give you a couple of bucks to buy a sandwich, but I'm not buying a new ticket to Brazil." On that note, he said, "Call the airline company." So I did call the airline company. In those days, in 1970, the person who has the paper in hand is the person that flies. Not like today, that if you lose a ticket, you go in the internet on your computer and print a new one on the spot. So they told me it's going to take 6 months to make sure nobody used my ticket so I could come back to the United States, give me a new one, go back to Brazil. In order not to worry my parents back in Brazil, I called the old man and said, "Listen, Dad, I changed my mind. Instead of staying here for a month, I think I'm going to be here for at least another 6 months. I love America. Are you having fun?" I said, "I'm having fun. It's a great place." "Okay, well, have fun. Bye." Click. I had no money, didn't speak English, no ticket, and no cash. So started looking for work, and I eventually find myself flipping hamburgers at that place called White Castle, making the mini burgers. And then made some friends, and the trip was going to be, like I said, a month-long stretch to be a year-long trip, during which I had some ups and downs, find myself literally panhandling for a few days in Hawaii and asking for a spare change so they could eat and, sleep in a newspaper on the sidewalk and get some, some of those moments. But overall was a very positive experience for me and made me mature a lot in a lot of, confidence and learning very early on in my life that all bad things happen for a good reason. And on that note, like that year that I spent in America, I went back to Brazil, and all I could think about is returning to the United States. Eventually went to law school in Brazil, and after graduating law school is when I decided to make my move in 1978 to finally come to America with the objective this time of teaching Jiu-Jitsu and sharing this wonderful art with the rest of the world.
So you mentioned being in Hawaii. So you went from California to Hawaii and back to California?
That is correct. My ticket, when I was waiting for my ticket, and once they sent the ticket to me, 6 months had come up, like July or something, 1970. This friend of mine, a really good friend of mine that worked at the restaurant with me, said, "Oh, you're so close, you should go to Hawaii. Go visit paradise before you go back to Brazil." So he talked me into, I had a little bit of money that I saved at that point. I bought a ticket, came to Hawaii, stayed at the Motel 6 at that time. at the times were $8 a day. That's how long ago it was. They might have started at $6, but at that time it was already $8 a day. So I stayed in Motel 6 for a few days, and when I ran out of money, I couldn't get a job because I didn't have the Social Security and that kind of stuff. So it took me a while until I could find myself a little construction work so I can get money again, and the whole thing was that. But yes, I was in Hawaii in 1970 and had a great time. I loved the weather, and it's just because the times were tough, I found myself, like I said, panhandling for a few days, but it was part of the growing up experience for me as well.
Okay, so the first time you were here, you were 17, which, if I remember right, was the age at which you brought Royce over to California. Is that
Right.
about correct? And then
Yeah.
you went back to Brazil, went to law school, and you came back in what year now? So how old were you?
1978.
Okay, so you're 26 years old when you got back to the U.S. And then at that point in time, were you teaching, or were you just having to work to try to survive first?
Actually, when I came back in 78, I contacted the people that I met on the previous trip, and this friend of mine invited me to stay there. And actually, his mother was kind enough to let me stay at her house, and she happened to be an actress. So she would go to work in the studios every day, and I would be home alone. But instead of staying home watching TV all day, I'm going out of my way to wash the windows, to clean the bathrooms, to cut the grass, cook dinner, anything I could do to show appreciation for her letting me stay at her house. And eventually I started looking for work. I didn't have a place to teach, of course. And she said to me, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Anything." "Do you want to clean people's homes?" I said, "Of course." So I would go to people's houses to, clean home and stuff like that for the ladies in Hollywood. "Oh, send them over here. And I'm going to clean everybody's houses. And then eventually find myself working in the house of a woman whose husband was the assistant director on a TV show called Starsky and Hutch. And 40 years ago, the lady looked at me and said, "Wow, you're a good looking guy. How come you're not in the movie business?" I said, "That's right. How come I'm not in the movie business?" She said, "Well, take some pictures and my husband will take you to a casting office." So I took a couple of headshots, and the guy took me to Central Casting, and I started doing extra work, Cross on the Background, Fantasy Island, Hill Street Blues, Heart to Heart, Quincy, Simon and Simon, Rockford Files, all those shows during the 80s, early 80s and so forth. I worked on those, and hundreds of times. At the same time, I left the lady's house and rented a house in Hermosa Beach with some friends. And that's when I had a chance to put mats on my garage. And everybody I met, I invited for a free class on my garage in Hermosa Beach. And people would come to the first class. As you know, Jiu-Jitsu is addictive. They fall in love immediately with the stuff, if not sooner. And then I would say, "Hey, first class on the house. If you bring a friend, I'll get you another free class. If you bring 10 friends, I'll get you 10 free classes." And the word started getting around, everybody bringing their friends to have free classes, and start growing. And it didn't take long, Ryan, until some of those guys would say, "Hey, Rorion, my karate instructor or kung fu instructor is now jealous that I'm doing jiu-jitsu with you and no longer training with him. He wants to challenge you to a fight. He thinks jiu-jitsu is useless, and he wants to beat you up to prove that his stuff is better." I said, "Well, bring him in." So the guys would bring their karate, kung fu, taekwondo, wrestling, boxing, judo, you name it, everybody to my garage to fight me. And of course, I would tell my students, what's going on, and explain to them, like Wednesday night at 7:30, the karate guys coming up to fight me. And in those days, like today, people like to see a real fight. So the students will pile up in the garage, and when the opponents of the different martial arts representatives will come to fight me, Jiu-Jitsu would give me the elements that, in a very humane way, be able to control my opponents, embrace the guys, put them on the ground carefully, mount on top of them. They would struggle to get out, couldn't get out, get exhausted, and say, "Well, I give up." And then I just lift him up and put him back up and the whole thing without having to beat anybody to a pulp, like I said, in a very humane way. Those guys are so impressed. They say, "Wow, I've been training this for 10, 20, 30 years, and I couldn't do anything with you. Can I start learning?" I said, "Of course." And then the guy would become a student. So most of the guys who came to challenge and fight me actually became students and personal friends of mine. And as you know, Jiu-Jitsu makes a very big bond with your people. And before you know it, you're sweating together, having fun together. And they're also helping to spread the word to their own students. And then that's how the West was won.
So do you have an idea of how many challenges you did?
No, I don't have an idea. 10 years, people would call me all the time. I think I did hundreds. I have no idea. Hundreds, literally. In a 10-year span, hundreds of times.
Would it be safe?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
would it be safe to say that you've done more than any of your other family members?
I would think so, yeah. There's no reason why not. People would come to challenge you all the time. Yeah, I would safe to say, I'll be confident in saying that, in fact. Never fought professionally against those guys, you understand? Yeah. Those are karate people that, well, martial arts instructors, they will come to my garage. Sometimes, 2 or 3 people, they're students or whatever it is, and the fights would happen right there. I never kept track of it, but it happened hundreds of times. In a 10-year span, lots of times. Richard himself saw lots of those, and a whole bunch of guys from the early days saw that. And Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in action shows a few of those that happened in other places, because on the garage days, unfortunately, I didn't have a camera to film those challenge matches, which would be, amazing to have those. But I have a whole bunch of stories. Not to mention, I was going to say, the times that when somebody said, hold on, there's a martial arts demonstration in such a place, on a mall or this or somebody's school, they would let me know. And I would go there to watch the guys' demonstrations, and often say, hey, I have a question, Say, what about if the guy gets you like this, for example, a bear hug from behind, and the instructor would try to get out, couldn't get out, of course, because I'm holding, I know what I'm doing. And then I said, why don't you hold me? And the guy would grab me, and then I'll show him the escape to do it and that kind of thing. And guy would feel a little bit uncomfortable with that sometimes. And the students would come to me and say, hey, I need your phone number. I want to learn that stuff. And always promoting the stuff that way. In fact, there's a story that I have mentioned many years ago, and I haven't talked about that recently. There's a martial arts instructor called the name of, what's his name? Hyo Cho. Hyo Cho. I think it's Taekwondo is what he does. I had no idea who he was at the time. I was walking on Santa Monica Boulevard one time, or Bundy, on that neighborhood. And I see this martial arts school, and I walked in because I was looking for a place to teach. That's before I had my garage. And I went to a martial arts school, and I said, hey, the guy was teaching a class with 30 people, And then I walked in, and he says, can I help you? I said, yeah, I'm looking for a place where I can teach Jiu-Jitsu. I'm from Brazil. I teach a martial arts called Jiu-Jitsu. And usually martial arts schools, they only open a couple hours a day, like sometimes after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because the instructor is not there all day. And my idea was, maybe you can rent me the location that is, at an empty time for you, lunchtime or whatever that is, for a couple of hours, so I can offer Jiu-Jitsu classes in here. And he'll give you some money for that. And the guy said, no, I don't want to do that. And I said, do you know what Jiu-Jitsu is? And he said, oh, yeah, I know what Jiu-Jitsu is. And I said, in a real fight, most fights are going to get to a clinch and eventually end up on the ground, I told him. But he was a, expert puncher and kicker. Taekwondo doesn't deal with anything on the ground. So he said, well, it's not quite like that because, in a real fight, nobody can take me to the ground, he said. And then students are all watching, 30 people, halfway in the middle of his class. So I said, listen, I want you to understand that if it's a real deal, it's not quite just stop when you touch the person and that kind of thing. He said, yeah, but I know about that, and nobody can take me to the ground. Because Taekwondo is this, Taekwondo is that. I said, you know what? The more polite I was trying to be, the more he was kind of getting to his head, So eventually I said to him, listen, your Taekwondo is good, but it's not as good as you think it is. At 28 years old or 27, I had a different temper than I am today. So I'm just kind of be nice, but, only so much I could swallow from that guy. So he said, well, you wouldn't want to try that, would you? He asked me. And I said, well, if you don't mind, I'd love to. Just so happened that I walked around with a duffel bag with my gi inside of it, And then they said, oh, go ahead and change that. So I went in the back, I changed, and I came back out. And he had the students all lined up against the wall this time already, everybody kind of out of the way. And he's kind of warming up and, ready to go. So I came back out and kind of stood up straight and squared up with him. And we're both like standing in the middle of the mat. And he moved around a little bit and then turned a spinning kick, spinning back kick. But it passed away about 1.5 feet from my face because of the distance that he was from me. It's kind of far. I didn't move. My hands are just hanging down, looking at him standing straight up on the middle of the mat. So he threw the kick, nothing happened. And I didn't move. So naturally, he takes a step to get, to cover that 1.5 feet distance. He takes a step forward so that the next time he spins around, he can hit me square in the head. That's what he's thinking. But by the time he took a step forward, understanding distance, I rushed him, got a hold of that guy, took him to the ground, mounted on top of him, and now he's struggling to get out from the mount. Jumping, jumping, jumping. He couldn't get out, of course. And I'm not hitting him at all. I just have one hand on his neck, and I'm riding the guy on top, like riding a bronco. And I turned to the students, 30 people looking at that scene, horrified, because the guy has all kinds of medals and this, very famous at the time. And people were just kind of shocked with the whole thing. And I telling them, listen, unless the person knows how to escape from here, they're going to have a really hard time. And the guy's freaking out down there, and I'm just riding him. Suddenly, the students all rushed towards me, pulled me off the guy, and say, what are you doing? What are you trying to do with our master? This and that. And say, hey, nothing, man. I'm just showing you guys something new. And during that scuffle, that push and shove, the whole thing, he said, I want to do it again. As you know, most people that do the striking arts have been practicing this stuff for a long time, often in front of a mirror. They can't conceive, especially in those days, in 1978, they couldn't conceive the idea of somebody else getting through the punching zone and take him to the ground. That was just wouldn't register. So he said, I want to do it again. So we opened the circle again, and the whole thing started one more time. This time, I didn't wait for him to do anything. He stood up there, and I stood over here. I just rushed the guy, got a hold of him, put him down, mounted on him again, same exact thing. He's struggling now. And then his assistant, another black belt, the guy's Korean, by the way, another black belt walks by us. And I look back, he's going towards a lifting weight, one of those lifting bars, leaning against the wall. The guy's just moving towards that direction. I don't know what happened to my mind, but I saw him walking on that direction. From the mount position, I tackled the other guy on the leg and took him down as well. So now all hell broke loose. Everybody's pushing, shoving, a big confusion, a big mess in the whole place. And somebody asked the guy, do you want to do it again? He said, no, get this guy out of here. So I packed my bags and I went to the locker room to change, Went to the locker room and a half a dozen students came after me. Say, who are you? What are you doing? How are you able to do that? That, simply, that clean, easily, that clean. I said, well, this is called Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Well, we never heard of it. I said, well, you will hear about it. That was the end of that. So, like I said, experiences like that, I had a whole bunch of those as well, besides the people that came to the garage. So there were a lot of chances to prove and confirm the effectiveness of our jiu-jitsu. Like I said, always in a very humane way, because that's what jiu-jitsu do for the practitioner. It humanizes the practitioner. It gives you so much confidence. And with the elements of fight, especially if the guy doesn't know how to do anything, which they didn't at the time, it gives you the chance to control the guy, converse with him, discuss, talk to him, without having to hurt anyone, which is ideal. That's the plan.
That's always been, all the experience I've had with you at your academy, these stories like this are all the type of stuff that you would always tell. And, to this day, I remember a lot of the things that you ever taught me and told me. And when did this particular incident happen? Was this before any of the family members had come up? Or?
Oh, yeah. That's 1978, a month before I got here.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have a jiu-jitsu academy, nothing like that. I'm still looking for a place. So leaving at the ladies for my friends, the actress Momfrey, my friend, the actress lady. Yeah.
Wow.
We walked out, just, I finished doing what I'm doing all day and just kind of hang out to walk on the street. I didn't have a car, just walking on the street. So yeah, it's summer of 1978.
Okay. Now, when did you start bringing up family members to help you?
I think Helson came mid-'80s, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And then I brought Royce in 1985, to stay with me, literally to babysit my kids. I had gone to Brazil in the early 80s, and Royce was very, playful with my younger kids at the time. And my wife said, hey, he's a nice kid and this and that. So I decided when I came back to the States, I talked to my dad. I said, Dad, what do you think about bringing my younger brothers all to spend time with me 6 months in America, to learn a little English, change the environment a little bit? He said, great, take them with you. So Royce was 17 when he first came. And in fact, by the time the 6 months were up, he said, I don't want to go back to Brazil. I want to stay here with you. So he stayed, he never went back.
So now, was there a period of time when both you and your older brother were both in the U.S. at the same time, but not in the same?
Yeah, Holly had come first before me. In fact, he was one of the inspiration for me to come to the States. His mother lived in New York, worked for Lufthansa, so he could travel for free, practically, So he had come to America a couple of times, and he described to me the emotion of taking off on the plane, and he made it with so enthusiasm, with so much passion. I said, I have to try this. That's when I started saving money so I could come here. So that was back in the early 70s, mid 70s or something like that. So then Royce liked the hang gliding, which is in fact is what took him away. And he would come here for hang gliding trips with some of his friends. And I remember that I moved here in 78 to live here. And then a year or so later, he came here during a hang gliding trip with some friends. I guess there's some areas here that are really good for that kind of stuff. And then we met, and he came to my house to visit and stuff like that. But it was a trip with a few friends to go to somewhere to do the hang gliding planes or whatever that is, hang gliding experience for him. So we just saw ourselves briefly here, but there was never a time that he lived here and I lived here. No.
So everybody taught it, I guess, at the Gracie Academy in Brazil.
We started there, yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess people so even Carson started there.
Yeah, Carson started learning from my dad when he was like 2 years old.
Got it. So from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody learned from your father.
Yes.
Even though there are some of your cousins who say they were taught directly by Carlos Sr., and they don't really say they were.
It's not quite like that. Yes, it's a little politics. You know how it is. It happens in everywhere.
Got it.
Uncle Carlos, who was the second father to me, was the first person to learn Jiu-Jitsu in the Gracie family. He's the one that learned from Mitsui Maeda. First guy, 13 years old, trained from 13 to 15 or something like that. 16, 3 or 4 years training under Mr. Maeda. Then the family moved from northern Brazil to Rio, early 1920s. Okay, and then Uncle Carlos started teaching Jiu-Jitsu and sharing with his brothers. My father, 11 years younger, Joe Carlos is in his 20s. My dad is like 9, 10 years old. Had a very frail health. Nobody knew exactly why, but he would run a flight of stairs and had fainting spells. No explanation why. So he was told by the doctors at the time that he should not practice do any kind of physical activity, which included jiu-jitsu. So he used to hang out and watch his brothers train. Until one day, when he was 16 years old, Uncle Carlos students showed up to the academy where they teach, and Uncle Carlos was not around, neither were the other brothers. So the guy showed up, and my father said, listen, my brothers are not here, but if you want, I'll teach your class, based on what he had watched his brothers do and memorized by watching it. The guy said, okay, kid, let's play. My father stepped on the mat and taught them in a class. By the time they got done, Uncle Carlos shows up, very apologetic. I'm sorry, I'm late, let's have the class now. The guy said, Carlos, no worries. I had a class with your brother Elio, and I liked it. In fact, I would like to be his student from now on. So my dad was promoted to be a teacher by his own student. What the old man realized is some of the techniques that he was practicing require a certain amount of physical ability and strength and speed, which he did not have. So to trial and error, he started modifying those techniques, giving more emphasis to natural body movements, better timing, to make the techniques easier to be applied by him. So on the test, on the process of testing those moves, adjusting here, moving there, adjusting here, moving there, he started fine-tuning the whole thing and becoming more and more proficient in that. And he said, Carlos, Uncle Carlos had 4 assistant instructors that taught for him, 3 or 4 guys. He's like main head guys. And Elio at that point was not on Carlos' radar, just a brother hanging out the whole thing. So one day my father comes to Uncle Carlos and says, listen, these guys you have are not that good. And Uncle Carlos, of course, in the temper, a very challenging mindset, him all the time, said, Elio, they might not be that good, but any one of them can give you a run for your money and beat you up if you have to. He said, well, we can find that out real quick. Why don't we set up a match tomorrow? And he's scheduled for the next day. Great. So the idea was to have a 5-minute round with each student, which one of the assistants, like 20-minute round, 20 minutes altogether, 5 minutes each. So I guess within the first 7 minutes, my dad already had tapped out 3 of the first guys, And then he said, well, do you think I can beat the other last guy now in 13 minutes? So Uncle Carlos was a little surprised by that. And then my father, of course, submitted the 4th guy. And from that point on is that Uncle Carlos started realizing that Elio Gracie had potential and started overlooking his work, coaching him more, watching him and training him and educating him in a whole bunch of stuff. So my father became the main guy at that point. So sure enough that, late 16s, early 17 years old, he started challenging, had his first challenge match, and the word started getting around, and he started challenging everybody. And I have the newspaper clippings that tell the story, by the way. And then back in the 30s and so forth. So Elliot now started challenging everybody and becoming the new champ and this and that, of course, under the guidance of Uncle Carlos. Did that for several years. Uncle Carlos was always my father's, how do I say, philosopher or mentor, I shall say that way. So that's a better word. Not only for him, my dad, but for the whole family. He was like the family guru, Mm-hmm. And as soon as he felt that the brothers had jiu-jitsu pretty much under control, especially my dad, that's when Uncle Carlos felt confident enough to start focusing his efforts on the concepts of food combining of the Gracie diet, because he realized very early on the important correlation between good health and good performance. If you have a fight tomorrow, or a performance tomorrow, or a conference, or a piano concert somewhere, and you're not healthy in the way you should be, who knows what could happen? Imagine you have a piano concert and you have diarrhea, you know what I'm saying? Or you have a major presentation to do to a business meeting and you have a gastritis that is bugging you. So this kind of stuff definitely impacts your performance. As a fighter, there's not even an argument. So Uncle Carlos realized we just couldn't afford to get sick. You have to be at your peak performance all the time. That's why he, although he was not a doctor, he decided to study the works of doctors and nutritionists, anything he could put his hands on to learn about nutrition, which is where he focused his attention to. And on that mindset, he spent 65 years studying food combining and came up with what we call the Gracie diet, which is not a diet per se because it's not restrictive at all. It's a way of combining your food. It's a food combining concept that allows you to virtually eat anything you want as long as you combine the foods properly so that your body works at its peak the whole time. I'm going to be 70 years old. I never had a cavity in my life. I don't have stomach aches, heartburn, headache, nothing. I wake up in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, full of energy every day, jump out of bed, and have fun every single day. So there's people just simply get used to the idea and get comfortable with the idea of feeling good one day, not so good on the other. Feel good one day, not so good. They think that's normal. But that's not the way it should be. You look at the animals in nature, they're always fine every single day. There's no such a thing, I got a stomachache today. No, because they have a very specific diet and they eat that with the objective of nourishing their body. Humans are the only animals that eat for the pleasure of eating. And that's a dangerous thing because not everything you like, it's good for your health. And if you keep that in mind, I like it. That doesn't mean you should eat it. Ask the guy who smokes. He likes a little cigarette, but he's killing himself. So the fact that you like certain things doesn't mean it's right, like I said. The secret is to learn to like what's good for you. That's the magic. And I was blessed to be born in a family where my uncle, like I said, spent 65 years studying food combining and said, hey, you should eat this, don't eat that. My baby bottles were cantaloupe juice blended with banana and the coconut meat in it. You know what I'm saying? So I was somebody thinking about that for me. I had no idea. But there was somebody guiding me on that direction. Of course, he taught the whole family to do that. And my dad, of course, is developing jiu-jitsu. Back to the jiu-jitsu training, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. So once my father took over the competition and the fighting on that, he became the guy who, the man to go to in terms of jiu-jitsu. So he trained all Uncle Carlos kids. Everybody learned from my dad. Everybody, no exception. Anybody who tells you otherwise is not telling the truth. And they know that. Now, because I came to America, I started promoting Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I told this story. As soon as jiu-jitsu becomes popular, it's natural that a whole bunch of people that are Uncle Carlos kids, they want to be next to him. So if it sounds like Carlos Gracie created the whole thing, they say, well, I'm the son of the creator of the whole thing. For me, it's irrelevant who did what. I know for a fact that Helio Gracie is the man responsible for the main contribution in terms of fine-tuning the jiu-jitsu in comparison to what the Japanese origins were. No doubt, hands down, that's 100% sure. And Uncle Carlos, on the other hand, did a job for me, in my opinion, as important, if not more important, than jiu-jitsu itself, because it's fine-tuning this concept of food combining. Ta-da! The Gracie diet. He never wrote a book, but I did. Available on Amazon. You guys should check it out. Bottom line is, by having the idea or knowing how to eat right, you are a different person. It doesn't do you any good to be able to choke or armbar everybody you know and have a heart attack at 50. Who cares? You know what I'm saying? So the idea of learning an amazing martial art and complementing that with a way of eating that keeps you healthy, allows you to live a long, healthy life, that's the best thing in the world. It's the best of both worlds. Furthermore, I would dare to say that you cannot afford to ignore what you eat. It's not smart. The same way you spend time focusing and fine-tuning your jiu-jitsu techniques because you want to get better, you want to fine-tune your move, you want to move up on the ranks, get another belt, and keep growing up that way. How can you ignore what you're eating?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if you're married. Do you have children?
Oh yeah, I've got two. One in college, one in high
What's the
school.
most important thing in your life?
What's important thing in what's mine? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
What's the most important thing in your life?
My kids.
No. You have two, right? I have 10.
Yeah.
My kids are not the most important thing in my life. The most important thing in my life is my health.
Oh, okay.
Because if I'm not healthy, I can't do for them.
And you can't enjoy
I
them.
can't teach them. I can't provide. I can't help. I can't guide them. I can't do anything. That's why when you're in an airplane, inside of an airplane, the flight attendant says, listen, if the pressure drops, the masks come down, put on yourself first, and then help your loved one. Are they being mean by saying, oh, don't worry about the kid, put on you first? Why don't they say, put on your little baby first? Forget that. You need to be well so you can help the others. So for everybody out there who's watching this show, which I know is growing in popularity because you do a great work, right? Here's the deal. You can't afford to ignore your health. How can you be a champion of anything? Not only jiu-jitsu, forget that. Anything, whatever you do, how can you be the best you can be if you have a stomachache or a heartburn or a headache as a result of your bad eating habits? What kind of champion is that? They can resist a bowl of ice cream for dessert. What is it? Forget that. You have a lot of work to do. You know what I'm saying? And the Gracie diet is a way for us to kind of share with the world this concept of food combining. As I mentioned to you, I came here in 1978, over 40 years ago, with the objective of sharing jiu-jitsu to the world. But after the UFC exploded and all the thing happened and the whole world has changed upside down, as we all know, I realized that my mission was not to come here to teach people how to fight. I came here to teach people how to live better. And the only way you can live better is if you're healthier. You can't improve your health by not studying, just guessing every day. I like the analogy that the great-grandmother teaches grandma, grandma teaches mom, mom teaches us, and we're going to teach our kids what we like to eat. Not good. Somewhere along the line, if you just keep repeating the same thing, it's going to perpetuate the health problems that we have. Americans are the most sick people in the world. No wonder we have more people dying here than anywhere else now that COVID issue is happening. People are already halfway there. You put COVID to make things worse. You have to be healthy. You need a healthy, strong immune system to protect yourself against all that. And COVID is just one now. 2-3 years down the road, it's going to be around still, and there's going to be new ones. Yeah. But if you keep eating junk food and don't care about what you eat, then you're going to make yourself vulnerable. So it's time to wake up. And like I said, if you want to, improve your jiu-jitsu skills, you should put the same dedication towards your health in your diet. And one good way to do it is this way, guys. Trust me.
I did buy several copies of the book when it first came out, and I remember distributing it to some of my friends and students. One of the questions that I have that some people might be asking is this diet. I know this diet's about food combination, and I know you have all the different groups that include meat and all that, but your interpretation of the diet, the way you've been implementing it, is it largely a vegetarian diet?
No.
So
I personally don't eat red meat. Oh. I don't eat meat. I might eat chicken, once a month, but if I don't ever eat chicken again, I don't miss it. I have fish once a week, twice a week, that's about it. But you don't have to stop eating meat at all. You can eat anything you want. It's not about eating certain foods and not eating other things. In fact, the only thing we don't eat is pork. Out of that, you can eat anything you want as long as you combine it properly. That's all.
Got it. And I know that you have menus and you have steps to implement it as well. Like I said, I do have the book somewhere. I bought several copies of it when it first came out. But
I'm not going to ask if you're doing it. I'm not going to ask if you're doing it, but you should.
No, I understand. But I do actually. I don't. For instance, I don't anymore. But when I used to eat wheat and rice and potatoes, I wouldn't eat them together.
Good. Great.
And I know that's, and as far as condiments too, you kind of watch the condiments you put on because there's sugars in that as well, and you kind of combine it. But even when I would make smoothies and juices, I would always use the combinations that you taught me to make.
Great. Good for you.
Yeah, like orange juice would always be alone, but I would have the watermelon and the cream cheese with the banana, or the apple with the banana and the cream cheese.
That's right.
But yeah, that's all stuff that I remember learning from you. And I'm thankful to this day. You definitely made my life better. I wanted to ask you a couple of, so we all know that your sons are the world famous Rorion and Henry Gracie. At what point or in what year did you turn the studio over to them?
Well, what happens is this: we had the academy for many years, and then I started getting busier and busier in traveling, doing motivational speeches, and talk about lectures on the diet and health. I started traveling, doing that, and because of my scheduling, find myself teaching less classes on a daily basis. And the boys getting more and more involved in that since they're very young, of course, as you know. And eventually they're teaching more classes all day, and I'm traveling, doing other things. So they decided there was time for them to kind of move on and do their own separate thing by creating Gracie University, which they're doing a great job, reaching a lot of people, and doing a very good work in terms of disseminating Jiu-Jitsu that way. So it was 2017 or something like that they finally decided to move out, open up their own facility, and do that.
Got it. Yeah, I haven't been to them. I mean, last Gracie Academy I've been to was the one in Artesia, and I actually trained at the original one on Carson before you built the upstairs.
Oh wow!
And even to this day, I just think of the way that you ran the academy, and a lot of the thought processes and the principles, the way you did things. That was always kind of a template for me to this day.
Good.
Even some of the ways I teach some of the students, like you told me specifically once. I was arm barring everybody when I was training one day in class, and you told me, I already seen you do 3 arm bars on people. Why are you doing that? And I said, because it's there. And then I remember you telling me specifically, Ryan, put that in your back pocket and start choking people. You said you can arm bar anybody. You've shown me that. Now I need to start choking people. And I go, but I can't choke too well. You said, well, you're not going to forget the arm bar. Put it in your back pocket and start choking. And I tell my students that to this day. And I've always told people that of all the Gracie brothers that I've gotten to learn under, it was you, Hoyce, Hickson, and Helson. You were actually the one that actually made me understand jiu-jitsu the most at that point in time when I was a blue belt, about maybe 5 years in. It's because you're articulate. You're so articulate in the way you describe things, and it's actually shown with your sons as well. What did you do to I guess develop the system in which you teach, because you teach differently from everybody I've come across, other than who I see with Henner now on video?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy that you can identify that. First of all, it shows that I guess it takes one to know one. I follow the guidelines of the old man. My father taught me to teach the way I do. It's a very unique, and it's interesting that you're raising that point, Ryan, because I also noticed that more than ever, people practice jiu-jitsu. It's a lot of sports jiu-jitsu going on, as you know, and you start going to a school, and the first thing you do is, before you know it, you're already sparring. You go up on the ranks. Before you know, you're competing. And then eventually you get a black belt. You go into a tournament. You win a tournament as a black belt. And you say, wow, I have a jiu-jitsu championship. I won. So now I'm going to open up my own school. And these people were not ever introduced to a teaching methodology that would address all aspects of jiu-jitsu, which is including the stand-up self-defense techniques. They never been exposed to that. So they now learn jiu-jitsu, they got a medal, they open up a school, and they start teaching the things they know, which is the grappling, the sparring, the submission, all that kind of stuff, which is wonderful. Nothing wrong with that. But they're missing a whole chapter, which is the standing up self-defense techniques that I've always seen my father teach, and I've always done. To this day, if I teach a class, I go to the self-defense technique standing up first, and then I show the guy the ground stuff, whatever that might be. So, because that makes the person complete. To just know the grappling on the ground, and you are at a restaurant with your wife or girlfriend, and some punk say something wrong, what are you going to do, put him on your guard? It doesn't make sense. You understand? So you have to know the whole package. Jiu-jitsu is an art of self-defense. And self-defense, more often than not, starts when you are living your life on a parking lot, on a supermarket, whatever there might be, and somebody attacks you, standing up. So you have to have a variety of techniques. For that, as I think you know, we had that book. You're familiar with this one?
I have it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this book that has all the standing up techniques, okay, developed by my dad, as you know. And I don't know if you're familiar with the app. You're familiar with the app?
I didn't know you had an app.
The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu app that is, I got to show you guys this because it's classic. Hello, everyone. Many of you know the Jiu-Jitsu book by Grandmaster Rorion Gracie. I'm happy to announce that we're releasing a revised edition that will include a whole new chapter about his life philosophy, plus a new app that you can download for free on the App Store or Google Play that will read the first edition as well as the second edition, and will enable you to watch every single technique of the book from every angle.
And if you want to add the mats, just click here.
If you press the pause button, you can see it like this.
Check it out. It's absolutely incredible.
That looks awesome. So that's on the App Store. Is it also on Google Play?
Yeah, exactly. Both App Store and the Google Play. It's the app reads the book, whether the first edition or the second edition. So the book you have, you put the app for free on your phone, point the app to the book, and the app reads the book and shows through augmented reality my father and I performing all the techniques of the book in a 3D character, as you saw here. Nothing like it. Yeah,
Oh.
give me a little credit. I'm the older brother and the father of everybody. At any rate, so now the people that never had access to the standing up techniques can get the book on Amazon and then download the app for free and literally see my dad and I doing the techniques. And you can freeze frame and you can look around the 360. It's just amazing stuff, you know? So I'm very happy with that too. So it's, again, another way to help promote and so that the knowledge doesn't get lost, because that's my concern nowadays. What am I going to do to make sure that the unique way of teaching that my father developed, which in my opinion is one of the most amazing things he did, was not only to do the techniques and fight and be very knowledgeable in the art, but to develop the teaching methodology that enables virtually anyone to be able to execute the techniques.
Totally in agreement with you, and maybe it's because of the influence that you and your brothers have had on me over the decades I've been doing this. But you know, that's one of the things that I see as a major problem today, in that nobody's really, number one, learning a curriculum to begin with. And if they are learning a curriculum, they're learning it kind of in a circular fashion, meaning just random here, lesson 1 here, lesson 300 today or tomorrow, lesson 290 today, not learning it in order. And that's where the methodology comes through. And I know that when I first learned it, Helson, you know, would taught me in the garage, and we had the 36 lessons, and you learned a little bit, you know, each one. And I know that's the way you taught. Now, at what point in time did you start incorporating group classes, or were you doing group classes from the very beginning?
This is another great question. I'm glad you raised that point, because to teach this course of self-defense I'm talking about, it can't be done on a group class, because there's always new people coming up and you can't be reviewing the techniques. There's a whole process on that. So that's why one of the reasons the boys came up with the idea of Gracie University, when I find myself in America in the garage days first, was only private classes. I did that for many years, one student at a time. And then when you open up the school on Carson Street where you joined us, then you have, you know, 20, 30, 40 people in a class. You can't be going through the same process with everyone. That's when you start implementing the idea of group classes, and you cannot go through every single one of those moves. But my point is, even if the student who goes to sign up for a class does not, how do I say this, you can't be teaching a group class to everybody on the same technique. You, as a teacher, you have to have the option or the knowledge to provide the option to the students. If the guy wants to just compete and spar, you give him that on a group class. That's okay. He wants to do that exercise thing. But what if the guy is a doctor or, you know, an executive who does not want to be grappling and getting hurt? He just wants to learn self-defense for himself so he can protect himself and the family when he goes out. So you have to have the knowledge on how to teach that way so that you can provide that service to your student. If the instructor doesn't even know the program of self-defense, he doesn't have the approach, he doesn't have the knowledge or the methodology, he can't even offer that service. You know what I'm saying? And that's my point. So people should know that. And that's one of the things that I'm working on here, to come up with a program that we can make it accessible to every instructor out there that might be interested in learning to teach the traditional, the original way that my father did, they will have access to that.
So now I have a question that's kind of related to the old days of you teaching, but I don't know if it's true or not. You correct me if I'm wrong here. Before you opened the academy, were you running or were you conducting or coordinating 600 monthly privates?
Yes,
that number
632. And I had 87 people in a waiting list.
So, and you were coordinating it between your place,
out of my garage. There's no coordinating. Yeah, out of my garage. 632 classes a month, private classes.
Wow.
I have the books, the daily presence books of that. And at the end of the month, I count how many classes I taught. So I got to a point I taught 632 classes in a month, and I had 87 people in a waiting list, including movie director John Milius, who did Conan the Barbarian that launched Schwarzenegger's career. And John would call me every 2 weeks, Jorge, I want to start. I said, John, I don't have time for you. At that point is when I opened up the academy. Exactly.
Well, I remember John because I remember Ethan too.
Yes.
And actually it was through Ethan that I met your daughter, Rose.
Oh.
So in fact, they both came over to my house one day for Ethan to beat me up at the house. But so now where did the Rickson teaching in the garage, or your garage, his garage, and then the Machados, where did they all kind of fit into all this?
Well, I started teaching class on my garage first, okay? And then from my garage, when Rickson came, right before we opened up the academy in the late 80s or something like that, I've kind of got to keep Rickson busy. So we put some mats in his garage as well, which is about 3 or 4 blocks from where I live. I rented a house for him, put some mats. So he started teaching class out of his garage. Eventually, I got a note from the city that said, hey, you can't run business out of your house. So that's when the Higa Machado had a place in Redondo Beach. I said, Higa, I have to move my academy, which is the garage, to your facility because the guys are keeping an eye on me nowadays. He said, no problem. So I moved to his garage and put my mats in there, and I went to teach class out of his garage. I moved the operation to his garage, which is, again, a few blocks away from where I was at. And then eventually opened up the school, and then Higgins kept going teaching some class in his garage. Rickson did the same thing, and I opened the academy to bring everybody together on that at that time.
Okay, and then I guess we've got to kind of wrap up here. I want to ask you a couple of last questions. So being that Rickson is my grandmaster through Dave Kama, when I moved to California, I remember seeing Rickson's name on the door. You had all the doors. There's one for you and one for Royce, one for Rickson, your private offices, your mats. And I never did see Rickson in the Gracie Academy until I found out later on that he was opening his own place. What brought about Rickson leaving the family academy in California?
Well, he was teaching at the academy for a while, during a certain amount of time. And then, Rickson, Hoyler, and Royce were teaching at the same place when we first opened up the academy in the late 80s, 1989, 90. That's when we opened up. So he taught with us for at least the first couple of years. And then eventually, he decided to move to Santa Monica. And then he opened up a place in Santa Monica for him. And he started teaching class out of Santa Monica, doing his own separate thing. Just grew up, he decided to make his own move and decided to go that way, which is, that's his thing. Nothing wrong with that. But then he moved on. And then Hoyler eventually started getting homesick from Brazil. His wife, with 3 kids in the house, and he's teaching class all day. He decided to come back to Brazil from the States to Brazil. And then Royce and I stayed there. Eventually he came up with the idea of some videos and stuff like that. And this kind of life went on. But it was just outgrew ourselves, the space. It's too many Indians, all the guys are tough, and Rickson decided to make his move, which no problem with that. I think, in fact, I was the co-signer when he rented the place in Santa Monica for him. So it's all good.
Got it. And now, and I know we're coming up on your time here, but last question I had for you is, how did you decide to have Royce fight the UFC and not Helson or Rickson?
Any one of those guys would have done great. We know that.
Yeah.
Of course. But I decided to put Royce because I felt that Royce, by being the smallest guy, Royce, little skinny Royce, when you walked into there, people felt sorry for him, like a little dove with a white, kimono and so forth. I thought it would be a more convincing way to have the public see the effectiveness of Jiu-Jitsu. You put Rickson and Helson there, they're both stronger guys, especially Rickson at the time, who wanted to, participate on that. And he goes in there, does well, to nobody's surprise, of course, like he did in Japan. That's a given. But to have Royce, who literally babysit my kid for 10 years, walk in there, the smallest and lightest guy than everybody else in the tournament, and do as well as he did, win the first UFC without throwing one punch. I think that really shook people to awaken to the benefits of jiu-jitsu. I think it was a very good choice. And then, turned the world upside down, very convincing. You see people today say, man, what got me excited about the UFC was to see the little guy beat the big guy, David and Elias. You know what I'm saying? So I thought it's my decision, it was my show, I'll do what I want. But that was got me my inspiration. So.
Yeah, I didn't question at the time because, I remember when Royce was training there were two brothers that were wrestlers that came in and they were huge. I think one was high 200s, the other was low 300s. And I know he was tag teaming them back and forth, Royce was. And I remember he put one down in what we call worst position, which is belly down with the hooks in. And I remember he just cranked the guy's back and the guy, he had to stop and he was just in utter pain. And I just thought to myself, man, these UFC guys, they don't know what they're getting into. But yeah, I'm very still fascinated by what you've accomplished, and I'm very thankful to you for bringing the art over and being the marketing genius that you are, so that I was able to see it and hear of it in Hawaii through the video that you produced for us in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action. And I'm convinced that without you, pretty much none of us today would be learning Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And even, the BJJ that everybody's learning today, sport jiu-jitsu. But it really comes down to your efforts here, and I really want to thank you for that. And I guess before we sign off here, is there any last things that you wanted to say? I mean, you mentioned the book. You feel free to mention it again. Anything you want, just so that we can get more information and learn more about where you're coming from.
Okay, so I recommend that if you don't know, if you guys can then put a link on that, it's graciemuseum.com. There's a lot of stories, a lot of history. I don't know if you remember visiting the museum there. And I think, now it's a virtual museum. You can just watch it and take the tours on 3D. It's a really interesting, well-done project. If you haven't seen, I would invite your guests to take a look at that, graciemuseum.com. And I also want to let you know that I'm preparing a program. It's a week called the Gracie Week, in which I'm going to tell stories and share some information and some philosophies and stuff like that I think people will benefit a lot. I also appreciate if you guys can put a link for the show down. I'll save you the link and we'll make it happen. So graciemuseum.com and this Gracie Week, it should be an interesting experience for all your viewers. I think are going to like that a lot. And I want to thank you, Ryan, very much for the support, for the opportunity of sharing some of these stories with you guys. And keep up the good work. Say hi to Dave for me, tough guy. And we'll talk again soon enough. Much appreciated for the opportunity, like I said.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Take
care, Grandmaster. All right.
I know.
Bye-bye now.